Picture this. It's 1491. Europe thinks they know the world. They've got their maps, their trade routes, their certainties. But here's what they don't know. Across an ocean they're terrified to cross. There's a continent. 2 continents, actually. And they're not empty. Not even close. We're talking about somewhere between 5 and 18 million people, hundreds of distinct nations, thousands of towns and cities, advanced agricultural systems, complex governments, thriving trade networks that stretch from the Arctic to the Gulf of Mexico. And in less than a century, everything is about to change. But right now, in the 1400s, this is North America at its peak. This is a world that's been developing for over 15,000 years. And tonight, you're going to see it the way it actually was. Not the myth, not the stereotype. Let's start in the east. The eastern woodlands stretch from the Atlantic coast to the Mississippi River, from the Great Lakes down to the Gulf Coast. And here's what you need to understand. This isn't wilderness. This is managed land, cultivated, shaped by human hands for thousands of years. You're standing at the edge of a Haudenosaunee village, the Iroquois. It's dawn. Smoke rises from longhouses, and we're not talking about little huts here. These buildings are 60, 80, sometimes over 100 feet long, made from elm bark and wooden frames, engineered to house entire extended families, 10, 20, 30 people under one roof. The village, protected by wooden palisades, 15 feet tall, double-walled with watchtowers. Now watch what happens as the sun rises. Women head to the fields. And get this, these aren't random gardens. This is the Three Sisters agricultural system. Corn, beans, and squash planted together. The corn grows tall, the beans climb the corn stalks, the squash spreads along the ground, keeping moisture in and weeds out. It's genius. It's sustainable, and it's been feeding millions of people for over 1,000 years. Here's where it gets really interesting. The Haudenosaunee Confederation, the Iroquois League, has been around since approximately the 1100s or 1200s. 5 nations, the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca. Later 6, when the Tuscarora join. And they've created something extraordinary. A constitutional democracy. Yeah, you heard that right. Before the Magna Carta really took hold in Europe, these nations formed a confederation with a constitution, the Great Law of Peace, Kayanaraqawa. They've got a council, 50 peace chiefs, chosen by clan mothers. Women hold real power here. They can remove leaders, they control property, they make decisions about war and peace. Ben Franklin, the founding fathers, they studied this system. It influenced the US Constitution. But that's centuries away. Right now, in the 1400s, the Haudenosaunee Confederation is keeping peace among nations that were once at war. They're resolving disputes through dialogue. They're creating trade networks. They're showing that different peoples can work together. Further south, you've got the Powhatan Confederation, around 30 tribes, over 15,000 people, villages with longhouses and garden plots, fishing weirs engineered to trap thousands of fish, trade routes connecting the coast to the mountains. The Cherokee in the southern Appalachians, they've got towns with hundreds of people, council houses for governance, ball games that bring communities together, We're talking about games with 100 players playing on fields longer than a football field. And here's what nobody talks about: fire. These peoples are using controlled burns to manage the forest. They're clearing underbrush, creating meadows for deer, promoting certain plants. The pristine wilderness that Europeans will discover, it's been carefully shaped by indigenous land management for millennia. Now, let's head west. The Great Plains, a grassland ocean stretching from Canada to Texas, from the Mississippi to the Rockies. And dominating this landscape, 60 million bison. You read that right. 60 million. Imagine standing on a ridge and watching a herd pass below. Not dozens, not hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands. The ground shakes, the air fills with dust, and the sound of hooves like rolling thunder. This is the heartbeat of the plains. And the peoples here, their entire existence revolves around this animal. But here's the thing. In the 1400s, they're not riding horses yet. Horses won't arrive in significant numbers for another century, brought by the Spanish. So how do you hunt a 2,000-pound animal on foot? Strategy, patience, cooperation. You're with a Lakota hunting party. 50 men, women, even children have roles. You've been tracking this herd for days, studying their movements, waiting for the right moment. There's a cliff ahead, a buffalo jump, a pigskin. The hunters split into two groups. Some hide behind rock cairns and brush, others circle wide, miles wide, getting behind the herd. And then it begins. The drivers stand up, they wave robes, they shout, they light small fires, and slowly, they begin moving the herd toward the jump. It takes hours. One wrong move and the bison scatter. You lose everything. But these hunters, they've been doing this their whole lives. Their parents taught them, their grandparents taught their parents. The herd picks up speed. They're running now. And then they go over. In minutes, there's enough meat to feed the entire community for months. Enough hides for clothing and shelter, bones for tools, sinew for thread, horns for containers. Nothing is wasted. Every part of the animal is used. The Blackfoot, Lakota, Cheyenne, Arapaho, Pawnee, Comanche, they're master hunters. But they're also traders, farmers in the river valleys. The Mandan and Hidatsa build earth lodge villages along the Missouri River. These aren't temporary camps. These are permanent towns with 40, 50, 60 lodges, each lodge housing multiple families. They're growing corn, beans, squash, sunflowers. They're trading agricultural products to nomadic hunters for bison meat and hides. It's a complex economy, a balanced system, and it works. The Plains peoples have trade networks stretching 1,000 miles. Obsidian from the Rockies, shells from the Gulf Coast, copper from the Great Lakes. They're not isolated. They're connected. Let's go south and west. The American Southwest. High desert, mesas, canyons, a landscape that looks impossible to inhabit. And yet, some of the most sophisticated architecture in North America is being built right here, right now. You're standing at the base of Taos Pueblo, New Mexico, and you're looking up. This isn't a dwelling. This is a complex, multi-story apartment buildings made entirely from adobe, sun-dried mud bricks. Some sections rise 4, 5 stories high. Over 1,000 people live here. And here's what's incredible. It's been continuously inhabited for over 1,000 years. That makes it one of the oldest continuously occupied communities in North America. Think about that. While medieval castles in Europe were being built and abandoned, this community has been home for a millennium. The ancestral Puebloas, formerly called Anasazi, are the master builders of the Southwest. Mesa Verde, Chaco Canyon, these aren't random settlements. Chaco Canyon was a ceremonial center, a political hub. Great houses with over 600 rooms. Kivas, circular ceremonial chambers, dug into the earth. Roads, yes, roads, 30 feet wide, stretching for miles, perfectly straight, connecting outlying communities to the center. But here's the mystery. By the 1400s, Chaco's been abandoned for nearly 2 centuries. Climate change, drought. The Great Drought of the late 1200s forced people to move. But they didn't disappear. They moved. They adapted. They became the Hopi, the Zuni, the modern Pueblo peoples. And they brought their knowledge with them. Water. In the desert, water is everything. The Hohokam people, in what's now Arizona, they built over 500 miles of irrigation canals. We're talking about ancient hydraulic engineering that rivals anything in the Old World. They're diverting rivers. They're creating fields in the desert. They're growing corn, cotton, beans, squash. Phoenix sits on top of their canal system. The city literally uses some of the same routes today. Let's talk about the ancestral Puebloans' agricultural genius for a second. You're farming in a place that gets maybe 8 to 12 inches of rain a year. One bad monsoon season and people starve. So what do? You create dry farming techniques. You build check dams to slow water runoff. You plant in every microclimate. Shaded north slopes that hold moisture, sunny south slopes that warm quickly. You develop drought-resistant varieties of corn that can survive on minimal water. You've been perfecting these techniques for over 1,000 years, and it works. The pottery here, world-class. Black on white designs, geometric patterns that tell stories. Vessels so thin and perfectly fired, they ring like bells when you tap them. The textiles? Cotton woven into blankets and clothing. Turkey feather robes. Yes, they're domesticating turkeys. The jewelry? Turquoise shell worked with precision. This isn't primitive. This is sophisticated. And the spiritual life? The kivas aren't just buildings, they're connections to the underworld. The sipapu, the hole in the kiva floor, represents the place where humans emerged into this world. Every ceremony, every dance, every ritual connects the people to their creation stories, to the land, to each other. The Kachina traditions, the rain dances, the harvest ceremonies. These aren't superstitions. These are cultural technologies that have held communities together for centuries. Head north and west to the coast, the Pacific Northwest, from Northern California up through British Columbia. And you're entering a completely different world. This is temperate rainforest, massive old-growth trees, rivers thick with salmon, an ocean providing endless resources. This might be the richest environment in all of North America, and the peoples here, they've created something extraordinary: affluent societies without agriculture. Yeah, you heard that right. You're standing in a Haida village on Haida Gwaii, the Queen Charlotte Islands. It's summer, and you're looking at something that doesn't exist anywhere else in North America. Totem poles. But these aren't decorations. They're not lawn ornaments. These are history books, carved in red cedar, rising 40, 50, 60 feet high. Each figure tells a story: family lineages, legendary events, spiritual beings. The thunderbird, the raven, the bear, the whale. This is how you record your past. When you don't have writing, you carve it. The houses behind these poles, massive cedar plank structures, 50 feet long, 40 feet wide, multiple families living together, carved and painted facades showing family crests. Inside, split-level floors, hearths, storage areas, and wealth. Because here's what makes the Northwest Coast unique. They've got a wealth-based society. The potlatch ceremony. When a leader holds a potlatch, they're not just throwing a party. They're cementing their status by giving away massive amounts of goods. Blankets, copper, food, canoes. Your power is measured by how much you can give, not how much you keep. And those canoes? Works of art, functional sculptures, carved from single massive cedar logs, some over 60 feet long, ocean-going vessels that can carry dozens of people. The Tlingit, Haida, Tsimshian, they're maritime peoples, master navigators. They're trading up and down the coast, fishing for halibut in the open ocean, hunting whales. Yes, whales. You're in a canoe, open ocean, and you're hunting an animal that weighs 40 tons with handheld harpoons. The courage that takes, the skill, the coordination, it's hard to even imagine. But here's the key to Northwest Coast affluence: salmon. Every year, millions of salmon return to spawn. The rivers turn silver. So many fish, you can barely see the water. And the peoples here have perfected salmon management for thousands of years. You don't take everything. You let enough fish pass upstream to spawn. You build fish mirrors and traps that are selective. You smoke and dry tons of fish, preserved food that lasts all winter. You manage the resource. You think generations ahead. And because of that, food security, permanent villages, time for art, ceremony, social development, the complex social hierarchies, the nobility, the commoners. Yes, even slavery exists here, usually captives from raids. It's not a perfect society. No society is. But the artistic achievement, the wood carving, the weaving, the metal work, copper, and eventually iron from shipwrecks, it's extraordinary. Chilcat blankets woven from mountain goat wool and cedar bark, designs so complex they take a year to weave. Each one tells a story. Masks for ceremonial dances, transformation masks that open to reveal another face inside. Theatrical, dramatic, powerful. This is a culture that's had 10,000 years to perfect life in this environment, and they've mastered it. Go north. Keep going. Beyond the tree line, beyond what seems survivable. The Arctic. Temperatures that drop to 60 below zero, 6 months of darkness, ice that stretches to the horizon. And somehow, People thrive here. The Inuit, the Yupik, the Aleut. You're standing on sea ice. It's winter. The sun hasn't risen in weeks. The temperature is 40 below. Your breath freezes instantly. Your skin would freeze in minutes if exposed. And you're about to watch something impossible. A hunter is making his way to a seal's breathing hole. He's been standing for 6 hours, motionless, in 40 below. He's wearing clothing that's more sophisticated than most modern winter gear. Caribou fur parka with the fur facing in for insulation, sealskin outer layer that's waterproof, fur-lined boots, mittens with attached strings so you never lose them. Every seam sewn with sinew, every stitch placed carefully, because one leak, one gap, you die. And then, strike. In one fluid motion, he thrust his harpoon down through the hole. He's caught a seal. This one animal, oil for lamps, the only heat and light source in winter, meat for food, hide for clothing and boats, everything you need to survive in one animal. The technology here is staggering. Kayaks, sleek, fast, silent hunting vessels, completely sealed, built from driftwood frames covered in sealskin. If you flip over, you roll back up. The anorak is tied tight around the cockpit. No water gets in. Umiaks, larger, open boats for transporting families and goods, whaling boats. Yes, they're hunting bowhead whales in open Arctic waters. A single whale, enough food and oil for an entire village for a year. The harpoons? Engineering marvels, detachable heads, toggling harpoons that turn sideways once inside the animal, line attached to inflated sealskin floats that tire the animal out. Igloos. You've seen pictures, but do you understand what they are? Emergency shelters built in hours from nothing but snow. The blocks placed in a spiral, each block angled perfectly. The last block dropped in from above as a keystone. Inside, it can be 60, 70 degrees warmer than outside, just from body heat and a small seal oil lamp. It's physics. It's engineering, it's survival science perfected over thousands of years. The Inuit have over 50 words for different types of snow, not because they're bored, because it matters. This snow is good for building. This snow hides seal breathing holes. This snow means dangerous ice conditions. Your life depends on reading the environment. And the navigation? They're traveling hundreds of miles across featureless ice and snow. No landmarks, no GPS. They're reading the stars, the wind patterns, the way snowdrifts form, the flight patterns of birds. They're creating mental maps passed down through oral tradition, stories that encode geographic information. When you see the mountain that looks like a sleeping bear, turn toward where the sun sets in summer. This isn't primitive. This is human adaptation at its absolute peak. Let's go back east to the Mississippi River Valley, and let's talk about something that nobody mentions in history class. The greatest Native American city that ever existed. Cahokia. It's 1400, and Cahokia is dying. But a century earlier, this place was massive. We're talking about a city of 10,000 to 20,000 people, possibly more. That made it larger than London at the same time. Larger than London. Right here, in what's now Illinois, across the river from modern-day St. Louis. You're standing on top of Monk's Mound, the largest prehistoric earthen structure in the Americas. It's 100 feet tall. It covers 14 acres at its base. That's bigger than the Great Pyramid of Giza's base. And it was built entirely by hand. basket by basket, over millions of cubic feet of earth moved. From up here, you can see the entire city spreading out below. Over 120 mounds, plazas, wooden palisade walls, neighborhoods, thousands of houses, a wooden astronomical observatory, Woodhenge, that tracks the solstices and equinoxes. This is the center of the Mississippian culture, a civilization that controlled territory from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico, from Oklahoma to Georgia. They're building cities, they've got a complex religion centered around the sun. They're playing Chunky, a game with stone discs that's part sport, part gambling, part status competition. The trade network? Vast! You've got copper from Lake Superior, mica from the Appalachians, shells from the Gulf Coast, obsidian from the Rockies. These goods are traveling over 1,000 miles. Cahokia is the New York City of its time, the hub, the center, the place where everything flows through. But here's the mystery. By 1400, Cahokia is nearly abandoned. The great city is fading. What happened? Climate change? The Middle Ages warm period is ending, the Little Ice Age is beginning, crop failures, political instability, maybe environmental degradation. You can't support 20,000 people in one place without impacting the environment. Maybe epidemic disease. Even before European contact, diseases could spread through trade networks. Maybe warfare, maybe social collapse. We don't know for sure. But here's what we do know. The Mississippian culture doesn't disappear. It transforms. The Natchez people in Mississippi, the Caddo in East Texas and Louisiana, the Muskogee Creek in Alabama and Georgia, they're the descendants. They carry on the traditions, the mound building, the agricultural techniques, the social structures. And those mounds, they're not just piles of dirt. They're temples, burial sites, platforms for chiefs' houses, sacred spaces. The Natchez have a caste system. The great sun, the leader, is considered descended from the sun itself. Noble classes, commoners, a complex society with rules and hierarchies. The southeastern ceremonial complex, archaeologists call it the Southern Cult, connects these Mississippian peoples. Similar iconography, the falcon dancer, the weeping eye, the hand and eye symbol, the spider, the serpent. These symbols appear on pottery, shells, copper plates from Florida to Oklahoma. It's a shared religious tradition, a shared worldview. And the agriculture? Advanced. They're growing corn, beans, squash, the Three Sisters again, but also sunflowers, amaranth, marsh elder, goosefoot. They're managing deer populations through controlled burns and habitat manipulation. They've got permanent fields, fish traps in rivers, massive storage facilities. This is settled, complex civilization. And in the 1400s, it's still thriving in pockets across the Southeast. But everything is about to change. Because in 1492, someone's going to sail west from Spain. And he's going to change everything. Here's what they don't teach you in school. The Americas in the 1400s aren't isolated villages scattered randomly across the continent. This is a connected world. Trade routes crisscross North America like veins in a body. Information flows, goods flow, ideas flow. You're a trader. Let's say you're from the Great Lakes region. You've got copper, not just any copper, pure nuggets that you can cold hammer into tools and ornaments. You travel south to Cahokia. You trade your copper for Gulf Coast shells. Those shells, they're currency, they're status symbols, they're valuable. Then you head west. You trade shells for obsidian from the Rockies. That volcanic glass, sharper than steel, perfect for knives and projectile points. Then you go south to the southwest. You trade obsidian for turquoise and cotton blankets. Then back east, trading the whole way. By the time you get home, you've traveled 3,000 miles. You've passed through dozens of different cultures. You've learned multiple languages. And here's what's incredible. You did it safely. There are protocols, trade languages, neutral trading zones, systems that allow hereditary enemies to meet peacefully to exchange goods. Sign language that lets you communicate across language barriers. Universal gestures that everyone understands. The Hopewell culture, earlier than the Mississippians, perfected these networks. And in the 1400s, they're still operating. Macaws from Mexico, found in burial mounds in Illinois. Macaws. The birds were traded over 1,500 miles north. Copper from Lake Superior, found in Florida burial sites. West Coast shells in Midwest mounds. Information travels these routes too. New crop varieties, new technologies, stories and news, religious ideas. When a new strain of disease-resistant corn is developed in the Southwest, it gradually spreads north and east along trade routes. When a new style of pottery emerges, you see the influence ripple outward over decades. The canoe networks are extensive. The Great Lakes connect to the Mississippi via the Wisconsin and Illinois rivers. The Mississippi connects to the Gulf. The coastal routes run north and south along both coasts. These aren't random journeys. These are established routes with known stopping points, places where traders are welcome, where you can get food and rest. And the trails? Some of the major trails in the 1400s will become colonial roads, then state highways, then interstate highways. I-75 in the southeast, it follows ancient indigenous trails. The Great Indian Warpath, the Natchez Trace, the Wilderness Road. These paths were chosen for good reasons. They follow ridge lines where travel is easier. They connect water sources. They avoid swamps and bad terrain. Thousands of years of accumulated knowledge about how to move through this landscape.
Let's talk about something that's disappearing right now, even as we speak. Languages. In the 1400s, North America has over 300 distinct languages, maybe more. We're not talking about dialects. We're talking about languages as different from each other as English is from Chinese. Language families that have been evolving separately for thousands of years. Algonquian languages across the Northeast and Great Lakes, Iroquoian languages in the eastern woodlands, Sioux languages on the plains, Uto-Aztecan languages in the southwest and west, Na-Dene languages in the northwest and southwest, Salishan languages on the northwest coast. Each language is a unique way of seeing the world, a unique way of categorizing reality. Some languages have no word for left or right, only cardinal directions. So you don't say, move it to the right, you say, move it to the east. That changes how you think. You always know which direction you're facing. Some languages encode information that English can't express. Whether you saw something yourself or heard about it, whether something is visible right now or hidden, whether an action is completed or ongoing. These aren't just words. These are different ways of processing information. And here's what's heartbreaking. Of those 300+ languages, most are extinct now, or down to a handful of elderly speakers. But in the 1400s, they're thriving. They're the medium through which thousands of years of accumulated knowledge is being transmitted. Because here's what you need to understand. These cultures don't have writing. but they're not pre-literate in any deficient sense. They have oral traditions. And oral traditions can be just as sophisticated as written ones, sometimes more sophisticated. You're sitting in a longhouse. It's winter, the work is done, and an elder starts telling a story. But this isn't just entertainment. This is education. The story teaches you where to find food in spring, which plants are edible, how to predict weather, where the safe crossing points on rivers are, history, genealogy, moral lessons. The story has been refined over centuries, every word chosen carefully, often in rhythmic, poetic language that's easier to remember. Mnemonic devices built in, the story is designed to be remembered and transmitted accurately. And it works. Studies of oral traditions show they can transmit information accurately for thousands of years. Australian Aboriginal oral traditions talk about coastlines from the last ice age, verified by archaeology. 10,000-year-old memories preserved in story. Indigenous North American oral traditions are doing the same thing. Haudenosaunee traditions tell of a solar eclipse that helped found the Confederacy. Astronomers have dated it to 1142 CE. Oral traditions tell of massive earthquakes and tsunamis in the Pacific Northwest. Geological evidence confirms a magnitude 9 earthquake in 1700 CE. The stories are real. They're accurate. They're sophisticated historical records. And the knowledge encoded in them? Medicinal plants. The Eastern Woodlands peoples know over 500 medicinal plants. Willow bark for pain, it contains the compound we turned into aspirin. Echinacea for immune support. Golden seal for infections. They know which plants to harvest when, how to prepare them, what dosages to use. This is pharmacology, passed down orally for generations. Astronomical knowledge. The Pawnee can predict eclipses. They've been observing the stars for centuries. The Pleiades guide their agricultural calendar. The Chumash in California navigate by the stars. They're making ocean crossings to the Channel Islands. Ecological knowledge, when to burn, when to plant, when to harvest, how to read animal behavior to predict weather. A grandmother knows that when squirrels are gathering more nuts than usual, it's going to be a harsh winter. She's right, and she's passing that knowledge to her grandchildren. This is science. It's empirical observation refined over thousands of years. It's just not written down. And in less than a century, so much of this knowledge will be destroyed, lost, deliberately suppressed. But right now, in the 1400s, it's alive, thriving, being taught in every community.
So let's talk numbers. How many people are we talking about? Scholars debate this. Estimates range from 5 million to 18 million people in North America in the 1400s. That's a huge range. And here's why it matters. The higher estimates, 10 million plus, that suggests a continent full of life, cities, towns, villages, thriving populations. The lower estimates, 5 million or so, still means North America is well populated, just more dispersed. But here's what we know for sure. Within 150 years of European contact, 90% of the indigenous population will be gone. 90%. Not from war, not from conquest, from disease. Smallpox, measles, typhus, influenza. Diseases that Europeans have been exposed to for centuries. Diseases they've built up some immunity to. But Indigenous Americans? They've been isolated from Eurasian diseases for 15,000 years. No immunity. None. When smallpox hits a community, mortality rates are 60, 70, 80%. Entire villages wiped out. Children, adults, elders, everyone. The social fabric doesn't just fray, it collapses. But that's the future. Right now, in the 1400s, Indigenous peoples are thriving.
Let's talk about health for a minute. Skeletal remains from pre-contact populations show some interesting things. These aren't primitive people living short, brutal lives. Average life expectancy at birth is low, maybe 35 years. But that's because infant mortality is high. If you make it to age 15, you've got a good chance of living into your 60s or 70s. The bones show good nutrition, strong teeth. Way better than medieval Europeans, actually. Strong, dense bones, evidence of healed injuries. The Inca, further south, are doing skull surgery, trepanation, and people are surviving it, healing. But there are health challenges too. Arthritis from hard physical labor, injuries from hunting and warfare, dental wear from grinding stones and processed grain. Tuberculosis exists. It's not epidemic, but it's present. Intestinal parasites, some communities have sanitation issues. But here's what's not present. Most of the epidemic diseases that will devastate the population. No smallpox, no measles, no typhus, no diphtheria, no whooping cough. These diseases evolved in dense agricultural societies with domesticated animals. Eurasia and Africa had cattle, pigs, horses, chickens, all living close to humans. North America? Domesticated animals are limited. Dogs, turkeys in some areas, llamas and alpacas in South America. Not enough animal reservoirs for diseases to jump to humans and evolve. So when Europeans arrive with their disease load, it's biological warfare. Unintentional at first, later, sometimes deliberate. Smallpox-infected blankets given as gifts, diseases deliberately introduced to enemy populations. But mostly it's just contact, trade goods, breathing the same air. And the demographic collapse that follows is almost impossible to comprehend. Imagine 90% of everyone you know dying within a generation. Your grandparents, your parents, your children, your neighbors, the farmers who know when to plant, the healers who know the medicines, the elders who hold the histories, the leaders who maintain order. Gone. Entire knowledge systems lost because everyone who held them died before they could pass them on. Language is extinct. Technology is forgotten. Trade networks collapsed. And then Europeans show up in force and see what? A depopulated landscape. A wilderness. They think it's always been that way. They think the land is empty, waiting to be discovered and settled. But it's not empty. It's been emptied by disease, in living memory. This is the greatest loss of human life in history, by percentage, by absolute numbers, by the speed of collapse. But right now, in the 1400s, none of that has happened yet. Right now, North America is home to millions of people, hundreds of nations, diverse cultures, complex societies. In 1491, if you could somehow see the entire continent from above, you'd see smoke from thousands of fires, villages and cities, fields and managed forests, canoes on rivers, trails through mountains, trade goods moving along ancient routes. You'd see children playing, elders teaching, hunters tracking, farmers planting, artists creating, ceremonies happening. You'd see life, human life at the fullest expression of adaptation to this landscape. And then, in 1492, 3 ships sail west from Spain, led by a navigator who thinks he's found a shortcut to India. He hasn't. He's stumbled onto 2 continents he doesn't understand. 2 continents full of people he'll call Indians because he refuses to believe he's anywhere new. And everything is about to change. The world these indigenous nations have built over 15 14,000 years is about to be challenged by peoples who don't understand it, don't respect it, and ultimately want to replace it. But for just one more moment, in the year 1491, the Americas belong to the Americans, the first Americans, and they're thriving.
So, what happened to all of this? Some of it survived, against incredible odds. Indigenous peoples are still here, still speaking their languages, or fighting to revive them, still practicing ceremonies, still maintaining connections to the land. But so much was lost, and here's what we need to understand. It wasn't inevitable. This wasn't some unstoppable force of history. This wasn't progress or civilization triumphing over savagery. This was a collision between complex societies, and one side brought diseases the other had no defense against, and one side had weapons technology, guns, steel, horses that gave them advantages, and one side ultimately had the numbers once the population collapsed. But it didn't have to happen the way it did. The deliberate policies, the forced removals, the residential schools designed to kill the Indian, save the man, the suppression of languages and religions, the breaking of treaties, the theft of land. That was choice, human choice. And here's what we owe the indigenous peoples of North America: recognition. Recognition that in 1491, this continent was home to millions of people, that they had built complex societies, that they had knowledge and technologies perfectly adapted to this landscape. Recognition that much of what we think we know about wilderness America is actually the result of population collapse and land abandonment. The virgin forest the Pilgrims saw in 1620, that was managed forest, abandoned when the people who managed it died from diseases that preceded European settlement by decades. Recognition that indigenous knowledge about ecology, agriculture, medicine, and land management is valuable, and much of it was destroyed or ignored. We're only now rediscovering controlled burning techniques that indigenous peoples perfected. We're only now understanding the Three Sisters agricultural system. We're only now studying indigenous medicinal plants that could lead to new medicines. And recognition that the descendant communities are still here, still fighting for their rights, still maintaining their cultures against incredible pressure. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy still exists. Tribal governments still function. Languages are being revived. Traditional practices are being reclaimed. So when you think about American history, don't start in 1492. Don't start with Columbus. Start 15,000 years earlier. Start with the peoples who actually built civilizations on this continent. Start with the first Americans. Because their story isn't just the past. It's the present. And if we're lucky, if we do right by them, it's the future.
The Haudenosaunee story? That's just one in 17,000 years of American history. Here at Chronomer, we don't start at 1776. We go all the way back. Mammoth hunters, ancient pueblos, mound builders, the real complete story of America. From Clovis spear points to the Constitution. From mastodon kills to moon landings. From the first Americans to the founding fathers. Evidence-based.
Archaeological facts, no speculation. If you want the full story, the history they didn't teach you in school, hit that subscribe button right now. Because America's story, it didn't start when you think it did.